this way connected with the CELA Fellows. And I'm really very, very proud to see that the community of CELA is continuing and growing and being very vibrant. I think for both Joel and myself, who were at the very beginning of CELA, this is probably the best present and best thing when we see that the baby that we helped to nurture many years ago, that it continues and is even stronger. So wonderful, and really congratulations and appreciation to you to continue this message and the spirit of CELA, and of course also expanding to other parts of the world with the SIBF support and others. As you mentioned, Dina, I would like to discuss today, and please take this as a very informal discussion. This is no official speech. This is basically me as a European sharing my views on Europe, where Europe is, especially from the economic point of view, how it fits into the global economy, what are the challenges that are facing Europe and Europeans, and also what are potentially opportunities for people from outside of Europe to invest in Europe or to develop some economic cooperation. When I say Europe, I mean primarily European Union, which is, as you know, a group of 27 countries of the EU. Unfortunately, UK is out, or has been out for some time after Brexit, but it's still a very important part of global economy. Europe today is the third largest economy after US and China. It is the place and the region where people love to come because of its history, because of the diversity, because of the great food and wine, etc. And a lot of history, of course, also in terms of industry and economy. But of course, Europe doesn't want to be remembered just for its past, but also to be part of the creation of the new global economy and the new developments. But it's not easy. And I think that Europe today is facing kind of transformational phase when we have to define as Europeans which way to go, how to evolve, and we have to make some important decisions. If I would describe where I see these transformational challenges, I would mention 4 or 5 of those, and they are linked to the fact that Europe has been growing in a very modest way recently, and it's also expected that it will grow somewhere between 1 to 1.5% of GDP as a region, as a group of countries. Of course, there are quite big differences where countries like Ireland or Central Eastern European countries, including Poland, Romania, etc., are growing faster, around 3.5%. But more developed countries like Germany, France, etc., are under 1%. So the differences are still quite significant among different countries within the European Union. But these differences are being gradually diminished. Anyway, this moderate growth is something that we would like to change and find ways how to accelerate the growth of the EU. But it is something that we do need to deal with. One of the reasons behind this slow economic growth are changes in demographics in Europe. As you know, Europe is a so-called aging continent or aging population. There is a growing need for skilled migration from outside of Europe. Obviously, this is not an easy process because as we have seen, this kind of uncontrolled migration can lead to increased violence, organized crime. As a result of this, then you have political forces who benefit from this, and establishment of some extreme parties, both on the left and right side of the political spectrum. It's enough to look at Germany, but also Italy, France, where you have these extreme parties which are very much utilizing the issue of migration as something that gives them political power. So I think one of the big challenges for Europe is how do we deal with the necessity to have more migration in Europe, but at the same time to keep the cohesiveness of the region, of the societies, and to make sure that this migration actually benefits economic growth. The second important challenge is issue of competitiveness. Europe has been lagging behind the other parts of the world, especially US and China, in terms of the competitiveness, in terms of innovation, in terms of capacity of its companies to be competitive globally. This is partly related to very high energy costs in Europe, which are related to several aspects. One is the outcome of the so-called Green Deal, which was introduced back in 2016, which on one hand was, I believe, a good idea, because in the situation of global warming, global climate change, Europe is a leader who is transforming its economy, industry into sustainable green industries and economy, but it has a cost. So a lot of support has been going into development of renewables, into supporting grids, etc. And this has an impact on energy costs. So the energy costs went up, and this was even more accentuated recently because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So de facto, Europe until recently was very much growing based on getting cheap energy and cheap raw materials from Russia, which is not the case anymore, and then transforming these basic elements of production into higher added value goods and exporting them. So Europe was and still continues to be a major export power, but these cheap imports of energy and raw materials from Russia are not anymore the reality. So this is something that Europe has to deal with, how to diversify its energy and energy imports from other parts of the world, including Norway, Middle East, North Africa, US with the LNG, etc. However, this has impact on the energy prices, and this also has impact on competitiveness. So the whole issue of competitiveness, energy pricing, innovation, and how to support innovation are important elements of this transformation I was talking about. Another aspect we have to deal with is so-called fiscal policy and sustainability, especially when it comes to the public debt. The public debt has been growing in most of the countries of European Union. In some countries like Italy, Greece, but also France, it's over 100% of GDP. So this is a major issue, especially when looking at what is called Growth and Stability Pact, which are basically rules for managing debt and deficit in the Eurozone, to be able to keep euro as the currency. And according to these rules, each country should be ideally within European Union should be in terms of debt under 60% of GDP, and in terms of deficit under 3%. Most of the countries, unfortunately, of the EU are beyond these brackets, and there is now big discussion about how to make this debt sustainability rules in parallel with the investment needs. So I think Europe, especially bigger countries like Germany or France, they realize, and the governments realize, that they have to invest more. They have to be more active as investors, but at the same time, on the other hand, they have to also keep some of these basic regulations in terms of debt and deficit levels. The fourth aspect I would mention is these are more political factors, and this is, as already mentioned, rise of populism in some countries of the EU, which is kind of threatening some basic elements of the EU, especially in terms of of cohesion in terms of working together as a group of countries. And some of these populist political parties, they are pushing for things like dissolution of the European Union, being very tough on migration and so on, which is unfortunately not the way forward. Also, another aspect that EU has to deal with is the issue of enlargement. As you know, we have these countries which are neighboring European Union to the east, like Ukraine, but also other countries to the east, Moldova, etc., but also to the south, especially the Balkans, which are in the dialogue and discussion with the European Union and Brussels about potentially joining EU. But there is big controversy within the European Union and countries, population of the European Union to a degree to move towards this enlargement process, because it has, of course, big impact on the region and on the budgets of the European Union. When it comes to the Europe's position in global economy, so it is still, as I mentioned, a major power in global economy. In terms of GDP, it's about 14% of global GDP. It represents around 17% of global trade. So still the region which has a strong weight in global economy. Europe is also known for strong standards and regulations, especially on the climate issues and GDPR. Some people would say that Europe has been the biggest export article of Europe are regulations, and I think we all realize that Europe, one of the problems of Europe is that it's probably over-regulated and over-bureaucratized, and this is something that we have to deal with. Also, obviously, Europe is in this rivalry with China and the United States as the two main competitors globally. Europe is very much, as I mentioned, dependent, especially on energy sources from outside of Europe, oil, gas, and other, but also very much dependent on critical raw materials. So there is also now a strong push from Europe to diversify its sources of critical raw materials, and many discussions with countries like Kazakhstan and others who have such raw materials about such partnerships. Euro is number 2, as you know, global currency and global reserve currency. So it represents around 20% of foreign exchange reserves globally, but it is still far behind the dominance of the US dollar. In terms of innovation and productivity, the R&D share is growing in the overall economy of Europe, but still a lot to be done, especially in such areas as green tech, aerospace, pharma, and other industrial elements. So given this situation in Europe, as I described, and as you see, it's not easy because Europe is part of global dynamics, and it has to find a way how to utilize its history, its huge potential, both human as well as industrial, how to move forward and how to be and continue to be competitive globally. So one question would be, what are the investment opportunities, especially for people, companies, countries from outside of Europe? When you look at European Union, I think I would look at a few areas where I believe Europe is a very attractive investment proposition for the countries and investors from outside. One is linked to the so-called energy transition. As I already mentioned, there is a Green Act which was adopted by the European Union, which means a major transformation of the industry towards so-called net zero industry. This means a lot of investments into decarbonization, a lot of investment into renewable energy, and we have seen in Europe huge boom in renewables. This still continues. Many projects, many investments in solar power plants, wind, geothermal, biogas, etc. So this whole area of energy transition, net zero industry, renewables, linked to this is of course a necessity to strengthen grids and investing into grids, because you probably noticed we had some blackouts in Europe recently, especially in Spain, Portugal, in Germany, Czech Republic. Most of these blackouts were linked to the fact that there are big parts of energy system now which are represented by renewables, but renewables are very inconsistent, meaning they produce a lot of electricity when there is sun and wind, maybe too much electricity, and some of the grids in our countries in Europe, they are not strong enough to sustain such a major inflow of electricity from the renewable sources. So one area where I'm also myself quite active, this is area of so-called battery energy storage systems. This means developing strong battery-based reserves where energy can be stored when there is too much energy in the system, and then this electricity can be traded later on when the prices are better. So I think the battery energy storage systems are a very interesting opportunity for investments. Of course, quite a lot of projects in such areas as green hydrogen, especially Germany is very focused on this area. But this whole issue of energy transition, green technology, renewables, better energy storage systems, it's one area which I would highlight as very interesting for the investments. The second one, which is especially recently since the war in Ukraine has been growing a lot. This is the defense industry. Europe used to have a strong defense industry, but then, especially after Second World War and after the creation of NATO, Europe kind of outsourced its security to the United States. But with the new policies of Trump administration, it's very clear that Europe has to defend and has to be able to defend itself. And now with the recent intrusions by Russian drones into aerospace of Poland and some of the Baltic states, this is becoming really urgent issues. So a lot of money going into defense sector, many defense companies being initiated. For example, recently European Union established 850 billion euro fund for support and for investments in defense. This can be used also for so-called dual-use technologies and projects. So projects which can be used both for civilian as well as defense use. Countries are now using this money also for building or improving railways, highways, because they can be obviously used also for defense. But there is a growing investment in new types of defense, for example, drones and unmanned aerial and unmanned ground vehicles. I myself engaged especially in the drones industry, which is obviously very important part of the new military, as we see it in Ukraine, where most of the military actions are actually now done by drones, and drones require also sophisticated AI-based software, but also batteries, which have to be ideally able to keep the drones for a longer time, have to be specialized batteries, and this is where I'm engaged myself as an investor. So defense industry and anything related to defense industry is now a big boom and I think opportunity for investors. The third area I would mention is the area of semiconductors and digital infrastructure. This is obviously very important for the competitiveness of Europe. These are core elements for keeping Europe innovative and competitive. So there is recently so-called EU Chips Act was approved. This again provides over 500 billion euro of support for large projects such as AI gigafactories, data centers, and the whole AI-based infrastructure, which is now growing in the countries. I myself engaged in a project in Czech Republic to build a data center in partnership with NVIDIA. But there are many projects of this type which are growing throughout Europe because data is the new power. That's the new big asset which is critical, and a lot of money in this sector as well, but also many opportunities in terms of investments. And then in terms of infrastructure and public-private partnerships, again, a lot of opportunities, especially in the modernization of rail, ports, energy networks, and so on. And I think one of the good things where Europe is competitive is, on one hand, it does provide a lot of public support for R&D. So if there are new ideas and need for early support for innovative companies, there is quite a lot of public money available in the form of grants, much more than in any other countries, or more than in US or China, etc. And many people are surprised how much of this kind of non-repayable money, grants money, is available in Europe, and also a lot of support for public-private partnerships. So to go together with the governments and to invest in such projects as ports or energy networks, rail infrastructure is something which would be interesting. And then, of course, also public equities. When you look at the valuation of public equities on the European stock markets, whether it's Frankfurt or Paris, Zurich, etc., they are, in comparison to US, they are very much undervalued. And I think that it creates opportunity for any investors on the public in public equities to do it in Europe, and probably with better margins and better results. So I would just finish maybe this introductory statements, because I would like to, of course, have more opportunity for discussion. I would just say that three things. One, I believe Europe is stable, is large and influential, but as I mentioned, struggles with competitiveness, demographics, and global positioning. And these are the challenges that we as Europe have to deal with. But I think Europe has proven in its history that it is able to cope with challenges and move forward. The second one is, as I mentioned, I believe there are strong investment opportunities in such areas as energy transition, defense, digital infrastructure, and private markets. And last but not least, I do believe Europe matters globally, not just economically, but also in terms of its role in geopolitics and in the area of international standards and regulations.